in making the delay, we were able to pull together all our guest speakers here to do a very informal conversation this morning. So we have our own little agenda, but we're happy to have you raise your hand, do a little heckling, that kind of stuff. They'll take it. We had dinner with some of them last night, you know. So I just want to take a minute and introduce who is here. Stephen Anderson is with the Winston-Salem School Division. Did I get that right? Because I don't have notes or anything here, and I'm already sleep deprived. Rushton Hurley is with nextvista.org. And Vicki, I don't actually know your Albany schools.
I am with Westwood Schools, but I blog at Cool Cat Teacher, which
Right.
is what
Yes,
people
yes.
know.
And Chris O'Neill, familiar to probably just a few of you in the world, he is at University of Virginia right now. So with that said, as I said, we're going to make this informal, but I asked them this morning, having sat through a couple of dinners now that always seem to degenerate into conversations about the oppressive testing environment in which we live, I asked them to start with a really good example of great things they're seeing going in schools. Some of them are in schools, some of them are in and out of schools a lot. And so we're going to go ahead and start with Stephen, just the good things you're seeing that are going on out there.
Sorry, I'm texting my wife. She's asking me for pictures for a calendar she's making for my mother, so I'd have to tell her, hold on a minute. So good things. So
What's her Twitter handle?
Melissa.t. No, she's not on Twitter. We'll tell that story later. But so good things. So I'm in Winston-Salem for Forsyth County Schools, just 2 hours down the road. We're the fourth largest district in North Carolina. I have 54,000 students. I have 4,000 teachers. I have 81 schools that I take care of. So I'm the director of instructional technology. So I and my staff go out and take care of all the technology integration needs of all of our teachers. And so I have one school in particular that's doing some pretty incredible things. I'm getting ready to roll out Bring Your Own Device across my entire district. And we're not calling it BYOD or BYOT or Bring Your Own whatever. We're calling it MLC. It's Mobile Learning Communities. We want to create communities of learners in every building, no matter what device they have, whether it's their own, whether it's one of ours, whether it's whatever. And so I have a school that's really kind of embraced that philosophy. It's a middle school. It's in one of the most beautiful schools you have probably ever seen. It was built by the Reynolds family, so if you know anything about cigarettes, R.J. Reynolds, Winston-Salem's the home of R.J. Reynolds. So this school was built by the Reynolds family back in the early 1900s. It's a beautiful school. It's a technology infrastructure nightmare, but because it's on the National Register of Historic Places, so you basically can't poke a pin into the wall. But so this school applied for a magnet grant, and they wanted to be a STEAM school. So I have a lot of STEM schools, but we don't have any STEAM schools. We have some arts integrated schools, but this middle school wanted to take the idea of STEAM and STEM and put them together. And so they applied for a federal magnet grant. Well, they didn't get it. And a lot of times most schools would be discouraged. They would say, well, we didn't get it, so we don't have the funding for it. And the principal at the school said, we're going to do it anyway. And so what this school has done is they have a population that's 99% free and reduced lunch, but they have, you want to talk about scores, they have the highest scores in the district because their principal has this visionary leadership in terms of using technology to create environments for kids and help them learn. And so they're our first MLC school, and they're actually MLC before any of our other schools simply because their staff bought in, and they already had this momentum from their STEAM application. And so what they're doing is they're really embracing our philosophy in our district of authentic learning. Project-based learning, problem-based learning, whatever it is, Wake Forest University, which is in our backyard, created and invented problem-based learning through the School of Medicine. And so I have a lot of teachers who are trained in problem-based learning. No matter what you call it or what you do in the classroom, learning needs to be authentic. And so that's what they do in this building. And so technology is kind of one of the tools that they use to create an authentic learning environment. So for example, the students last year were learning about World War II in the entire building, whether it may be prescribed in a certain part of the curriculum, but all of the kids were embracing it. So they turned their entire school into the beaches of Normandy. They had trenches, they had They had kids on one side, they had kids on the other. I mean, it was amazing, but they modernized it. So they had kids using technology, learning about GPS coordinates and mapping and all kinds of uses of technology. But the technology was an afterthought. It was more or less putting them in the experience and putting them in the environment. And just one other thing is, behind the schools is a very historic school, very historic neighborhood. The high school that sits above them on a ridge needs a football stadium, so they're going to tear down a park to put in a football stadium. Well, the kids don't like that, and so they're spending the entire year this year measuring the impact that this football stadium is going to have on the community in terms of access to the park. They're looking at the scientific impact, they're looking at the environmental impact, they're looking at the community impact, and then at the end of the year they're going to present their findings to the city council in order to get them to change their mind on building this football stadium. And these are kids who are going to go to this high school next year. So it's for us, we're trying to use bring your own device and bring your own technology to create authentic learning for kids, because really any kid can benefit from that, right? So if you go into a classroom and you make fractions meaningful to kids, instead of teaching them this is how you multiply fractions, and here let's do 5,000 problems in the back of the book in order to practice. Rather, if you make it meaningful using football statistics or using what's happening in the world around them, it really creates an environment where kids want to come to school, where kids want to learn.
Good morning, everybody. All right. How many of you are in the classroom right now? Well, I mean, not right now, but I mean, just generally. Okay. Now, how many of you have had the experience of teaching with another teacher? So the two of you were team teaching something. Reason I ask is I had the opportunity to work. I was a Japanese language teacher, and I had the opportunity to have a young person from Japan come and work with me, and we team taught classes. And I was always kind of amazed at how helpful that was in just kind of identifying what was happening in the room. When you're not the one directing things, when somebody else is doing that, and you stand to the side and you just watch your students, you see things you don't normally see. And that led to really good conversations with the assistant teacher, things like that. I say all that because Karen asked us to come up with something that we thought was kind of cool. And something I saw recently is at a place called New Tech High School in the Napa Valley School District. That if that sounds like a cool place to be, that's because it's a cool place to be. And they're doing some really interesting things that are possible, I think, anywhere, but just different enough. So, for example, they've got some classes that have 50 or more students, but 2 teachers are handling that class. So they're finding ways to get people to experiment with with how they're using time, how they're working together on teaching different things. And so if they combine, for example, an English and a history class and have 2 teachers handle it, that leads to a different kind of educational experience for the kids, which is kind of cool. I think that we're kind of just in a wonderful time. I know that sounds strange given the oppressive quote accountability unquote things that we deal with, but I think it's a wonderful time for us to be able to tap into the ideas of others, and I'm sure you'll be hearing about that all through the conference. So thank you guys for making it in early as well and braving the elements to do so.
Hey everybody, I'm Vicki Davis. How are y'all? From Georgia, can you tell? I saw an amazing ad last night that I think really pictures, Karen, what you were talking about. And a guy put together a pool and it said, do you want to have the nuts or the bolts? And he had just put it together with the nuts and the pool fell apart. And to me, HOTS and LOTS, lower order thinking skills and higher order thinking skills, are the nuts and the bolts, and we need both. So the stuff I'm most excited about are actually schools that are making it possible to put in the HOTS. So I just want to mention some key terms I think you need to listen for in the conference as I've looked over the calendar. Now in my own classroom, my 9th and 10th graders are actually going to teach every kid K-5 through 5th grade next week for the hour of code. They're going to teach them how to code. And for an hour, and I'm a little nervous about it, so I'm going to speak to y'all tomorrow, and then I'm going to fly back and then see the lesson plans my students have developed, because I'm very project focused. I have project managers in charge of each day. So I'm really excited about that. I wrote an article on Edutopia, 15 plus ways to teach kids how to code even when you don't have a computer. And it's for age 5 and up. So this is something all of you can do, and I think the hour of code is a great thing. But Makerspace and the Learning Commons, I think, are huge. Anybody have Makerspaces or Learning Commons in your schools yet? Awesome. Are y'all presenting? Oh, get them and snatch a knot. Okay. Well, y'all just mob them after this is over because Learning Commons and Makerspaces are really important. If you want to learn more about that, read Invent to Learn by Sylvia Martinez and Gary Stager. It's a fantastic book that you should buy for your librarian when you go back because that's very important. I'm really excited about this, something called the AIC conflict simulation, Arab-Israeli conflict simulation that my 9th graders have been doing where they've played world leaders. It's out of the University of Michigan, and my students presented 2 weeks ago at the Global Education Conference, and I've got the link on my blog. Now, Google has just announced Google Connected Classrooms, and you can go on virtual field trips. That link will be tweeted out today through my own blog, but through my Twitter. But Mystery Skype and all these virtual ways to connect are becoming really hot, and a lot of people are bringing some things into their classroom they couldn't before. Hashtags, how many of you are tweeting already? Okay, the hashtags, as you know, in education are really taking off. EdTech Chat and EdChat, there's so many hashtags. SatChat for those who get up early on Saturday. Of course, 3D printing is kind of an in thing, and you're probably going to mob him. I don't know. There's a fella out there who had his 7th graders build an open source 3D printer for $700. And I'm so wowed, I can't even believe it. But 3D is very exciting. Things like Scratch help make geometry real, and things like 3D printing help it as well. And of course, ed camps. Anybody ever gone to an ed camp? Okay, ed camps are huge, and they're actually taking ed camps online. Right now, they're having the 12 days of ed camp. So you can follow Ed Camp Gift, and anything really cool at this conference, I would encourage you to tweet to Ed Camp Gift, because that's really kind of a big way people are sharing right now. I talked to, is it Kristen Swanson that runs those? And she said in the first day they had over 1,000 tweets of cool ed tech gifts. And at my school we are doing BYOD. I do like your term MLC, so I'm going to have to go back and talk about that. We re-engineered our network, so I've been really excited about that at my school. It's been quite an undertaking, though, trying to help everybody use their devices responsibly. It's always a challenge.
Good morning. Hashtag Pine Room.
It doesn't open till noon, I checked.
Just kidding. I'm Chris O'Neill from Virginia. And I want to share one thing that I saw. I'll be brief, that I saw in a 5th grade classroom. So I was able to visit a school, and the first thing that struck me in this particular school was the principal said, I said, give me a little vibe about the school. And she said, well, I'll tell you this, we don't contrive stuff here. So when you go in the classroom, we're not setting up anything for your little visit, and people are going to have little memorized speeches. And so I'm letting you know right now, these kids are on, and they're used to people coming into the class. And so I'm telling you up front, I don't know what you're going to hear from these kids. So it was awesome. I went in this 5th grade classroom, and the guy had just basically begged, borrowed, and stolen all kinds of devices. So he had like 3 iPads and some Samsung tablets and laptops. And so I go over to this little girl, and I said, so what are you working on? She goes, you know what, I'm just going to need 2 minutes before we start doing the interview thing. Because I'm right in the middle of doing this, but I'll get right back with you. So I thought, that is freaking awesome, because that is totally real world. I mean, that is, somebody comes in unannounced and you're in the middle of something, and she just very politely said, I just need 2 minutes and I'll be right with you. So I patiently waited 2 minutes, and I kind of floated around to see some of the other kids. And what I loved about this classroom is, one, the kids would get devices pretty much without asking. So the teacher occasionally would go, here's an NAM moment. I need a moment of your time. And that was sort of the cue word for everybody to really stop, because I do need everybody to look at me for just a minute. And she would do the need a moment thing. And she'd say whatever it was that needed to be said. And then her co-teacher would come in and he'd do his little spiel and things like that. But the 2 big things that struck me in this classroom were, one, the kids didn't give a flip about which device it was. So they might go over to grab a device and the laptop wasn't there. And they'd go, okay, well, I'll use the iPad for this one. It's all on the cloud anyway. And they just rolled with stuff like that. But the coolest thing I think about the whole classroom was when I would ask the kids why they were doing stuff, they knew exactly why they were doing it. It wasn't, we're doing Animoto because it's cool and we get to do these images. They were doing little commercials for their region or whatever the lesson was. But I'd say, why Animoto? And they go, well, it doesn't really matter, dude. It's just, win these people over. Like, that's the competition in the class right now. So whatever tool I need, like I just use Animoto. And I'd ask the next kid, well, what are you doing with yours? And they go, well, it's the same competition, but I don't like Animoto, it sucks. You know, I'm using like old school stuff. And I'd say, what old school stuff? Well, have you ever heard of PowerPoint? But really, the most awesome thing about it really was the technology for them was so natural, which is what we've always wanted to be for a long time, but really their work was so natural, and I think that was kind of the coolest part. They weren't doing things, they were actually really working. There were competitions going on, and they had a Google Hangout with some business dude coming up. So they were doing all the things we want them to do. They were practicing, rehearsing, making deals with each other. You know, I'll let you use this if you do this for me. And they would constantly ask the teacher, you know, why do I need to add in more information in my slideshow? And it was such a great rapport with the teacher, because she would say things like, because I'm not convinced that, you know, you're trying to get me to do what you're saying, or I don't understand why you're using these images, or I'm totally getting a much more powerful message from this table. And you can just see the kids like, why? Why is their message more powerful? And it was just phenomenal. They were just in such a good groove with using technology for real work stuff that again, I love the principal's message on the way, and none of this stuff's contrived. And then finally asking the teachers, the two teachers, how did you structure all this? And they really did say, we spent a ton of time just talking to people outside the classroom. We have guest speakers, we have people physically coming in or Skyping in and saying, just tell us one thing you did today that has anything to do with fractions. To use Stephen's example, or Rushton's, I forgot which one said it. Or tell me one thing you had to do today that had to do with group work where somebody wasn't pulling their weight. And so it was phenomenal. Their guest lectures weren't things like, let me tell you all about my awesome job. They were very focused questions, and they were 3 minutes of somebody's time, and kids could see, oh, now I get it. This is why we have to do these things in this way. So anyway, it's such a technology in a real life situation. It was just phenomenal. And I've never seen kids being more productive and more little light bulbs going off, I think, than that.
Okay, then we'll start with you and go back, thank you. Okay, so I'm still hearing vibes of, yeah, but. We could do that because, and actually I'll back up real quick. For those of you, because we saw a couple of hands for learning spaces and maker spaces, that's part of what the new hacker space is all about here at VSTE. Today the folks will be out there. Tim Stalmer, wave to us. Tim and Andrew are there. I think I've seen 2 3D printers set up and a couple Arduinos and maybe a Raspberry Pi or 2. Talk to them, particularly Andrew, who's running a maker space at Flint Hill School, about the kinds of things that they're doing, if that's a new concept to you. So make sure you do that. And tomorrow they'll be downstairs in the Dead Presidents area. So you know, for newbies to the hotel, ghosts, mountains, dead presidents. That's how you figure out where you are in the hotel. So when we say to you, oh, it's in the Dead Presidents, that's downstairs along the staircase. Anyway, so I'm still hearing some buts, but that would work, So quickly, just a minute or two of, what do you say to the butt people, the challenge, sorry, and we're streaming this on top of it. What do you say to those people who say, yeah, but it won't work in my classroom? Your elevator speech.
What do I say to the butt people? I like big.
Yeah, right.
What I say to them is, even in those classrooms, the one classroom that I visited just like that, when you ask the teacher, why'd you choose the commercials for your area? She said, oh, it's a standard. So there isn't a yeah but. So she's still having to meet all the standards. And she, in this particular class, even had printed standards on her bulletin board. And she said, these are reminders for the kids. They're more reminders for me to stay focused on the standards. And so you could ask the kids, you know, so what are you learning by doing this little Animoto thing or whatever it is? And they were like, dude, we can kick butt. You ask me any single thing about Piedmont region. And they are kicking butt. They're like, that's pictures on a picture of Piedmont. So you could hear kids working at their table arguing that wasn't an appropriate image. That isn't going to sell anybody to come here. So they were doing really higher order thinking about what imagery matches this SOL or whatever it was. And so I think the yeah but is, this wasn't a fancy little classroom that was in the special academy of the blah, blah, blah. This is a good old-fashioned regular classroom where, unfortunately for that teacher, according to her, standards still ruled. So she's still focused on standards. She's just looking at what's the bigger picture that makes these things really stick. And again, her big thing was sort of retention rate type thing. So I know I can get these kids to pass in the spring. That's a really low bar. What I really want, though, is for them to truly be, sellers of their region and understand why some region's different from theirs in this particular standard. So I think the but really is, it wasn't a but. It's still standards focused. She didn't have any more technology, and he didn't have any more technology than anybody else. But they still had things to accomplish it with the same tough things we all have to accomplish. It just did it sort of from a different angle and for a different reason.
And I apologize for being sort of distracted here, but I'm also running the conference from my phone, so.
It's my turn to do that.
Yeah.
My but is always, but what will you do if you're not going to do that? Because we all have to be innovators. Innovation and creativity is a mindset. If we expect our students to do it, it starts with us. So that's the first thing. You need to do something. You can't do everything, but you can do something. And what will that be? Because you either innovate or you depreciate. That's it. We have to improve. We have to grow. And we have a saying in the South, when you're green, you're growing, and when you're ripe, you rot. And so if you're ripe, if you can't add anything, if you can't grow, then you are rotting. And as teachers, we have to move forward. And we can't settle. And even in my own classroom, every year I sit down with my curriculum director and I say, you know what, I've got to do this better. The best way to improve your classroom is to have a focus group with your students. I do an anonymous survey with my students at least once a year, and I do a focus group twice a year. And by focus group, we circle up. I actually record it in Evernote so that I can listen to it in the summer after I've recovered from the exhaustion burnout in May. So I re-listen to it in July, and I go around and I have them say, okay, what did you like the best that we did? What did you hate? What did you hate with the passion of 1,000 suns that I have got to improve for next year? So this year I redid my whole curriculum on binary numbers and adding and converting and all that really exciting stuff, and it was a lot more fun. And it was bits and bytes. I used Dave Burgess's Teach Like a Pirate concepts that he has, which is an awesome book. Anybody read Teach Like a Pirate? Oh, every teacher should read it. It's a fantastic book. It's a hashtag TLAP. But I dressed like a vampire, and I actually did the putty teeth. And I had the lights off, and I had old Dracula movies playing, and I had spider webs all over, and I hid outside the door. And they came in, and I came out, and I said, today we will do bits and bytes, and we will not let it take a bite out of you. And I taught them binary numbers, and they loved it. I did PSAT prep as a zombie. I didn't want them to be test zombies. I wanted them to go in with educated. And they love it. I call it having a guest speaker. So I'll tell them to have a guest speaker tomorrow because I do not admit to looking like that. And I really try to hide it from the other teachers because they think I'm totally crazy. But I will do whatever it takes. Sometimes you have to dress up the stuff they hate and make it exciting and fun. And Oriental trading, you can get all kinds of cheap stuff from there. I had little candy teeth, which they didn't like. I had gushy eyeballs for zombie prep. So you can do all kinds of cool stuff and just don't settle. Don't let that awful lesson that you hate and they hate stay awful. Turn it around and make it the best lesson of the year.
So when I think about yes, but I would say I'm worried more about the person who would be speaking. It is way too easy as a teacher to become jaded, to give in to that sense of powerlessness, when in fact the kids walk into your classroom every day and you got a chance to change a life. And that goes no matter how many restrictions are put on us, really. Now that's not to say we should ignore them by any stretch, but how many of you would say that your number one stress is time? All right. So time is one of those things that, we've all heard people say this. That's just one more thing. I don't have enough time to get through the curriculum as it is. That kind of stuff. More to the point, not every learning moment is equal. Not every minute that we have is equal. So if we have more minutes, but we don't have the minutes that really count, it really doesn't matter how many minutes we got. I think if you look back at your own experiences as a student, you're going to think about those moments where things were actually a little unexpected, where a teacher did something a little different, and that caught you off guard. And those were moments where whatever it is that happened, you learned tons from. Where there are probably vast stretches of school years where you'd say, I really don't recall anything from that, and that's natural enough. So I think if we can make sure that the moments that we use are good moments, that becomes a focus for us that allows us to get past the yes but, I think.
I don't know about in Virginia, but in North Carolina, we have a clause called other duties as assigned. So another duty as assigned would be bus lot duty, right? So you go out at the end of the day, kids are all going out to buses, they're all going out to their cars to go home. And if you, as an outsider, I get to look at that a lot. I get to be in schools and I get to see the interaction between teachers and kids. And if you look at those two groups of people at the end of the school day, who is way more exhausted than the other? The teacher, which is completely backwards. Teachers shouldn't be exhausted, bad exhausted. I know when Vicki when she dresses up and she does those things, that's a good exhausted. You feel really good at the end of that day because you really feel like you made a difference. But if you spend copious amounts of time lecturing in front of kids, creating PowerPoints that allow you to drone on for hours and hours and hours and hours, taking your overhead, which I know there are still of them, they're out there, and writing on, because my wife has one, your transparencies when you get your vis-a-vis marker on the back of your hand, you're working too hard. And so my yeah but is, if you're working harder than your students, you're doing it wrong. And what a lot of us hear, and I know a lot of it's preaching, but to those people who aren't here, if you're spending copious amounts of time creating things for your kids that mean nothing, it's a waste of time. So the yeah, but is all of the things that all of us in this room do, creating maker spaces and creating mobile learning communities and helping kids understand how to, not only how to use technology, but choosing the appropriate technology for the use. Like, I don't use Animoto because it sucks, so I'm going to use something that's meaningful to me. That wasn't dictated by the teacher. But oftentimes we walk into classrooms and the teacher says, you will create a PowerPoint that has 14 slides and has 3 bullets per page and has this kind of font. Who does that in the real world? Nobody. I'm allowed to choose how I can demonstrate my mastery. And by me putting in all of those stipulations, I'm working way harder than my kids are working. So my yeah but is, if you work harder than your kids, you're doing it wrong. You're teaching wrong. Let your kids be exhausted at the end of the day. I want to walk out to schools and I want to look out on bus lots and I want to see teachers going like this because they had an awesome day. And I want to see kids just going like, oh my God, I learned so hard today.
Very cool.
Okay, so I'm just going to use my indoor teacher voice. So questions, let's throw it up in the Lafayette group here. Any questions, comments, heckling? Anyone?
Ooh, heckling. Heckle.
No heckles? Really? It's too early probably yet. Okay. Questions? Concerns, ideas, anybody? All right.
I dare somebody to ask a question.
Yeah, right. I double dare.
Heckle.
Go ahead.
It's not a question,
Okay.
but I was in a previous life, I was a music teacher, and when I went through training, the classes, we studied classical music, and there's lots and lots of rules to writing classical music. And the professor said, without rules, you have no creativity. And does that liken to all the standards that one must follow? But that doesn't limit the creativity. It actually forces you to be more creative on how you deal with these finite things that you must cover. Thoughts?
So just for the streaming folks out there, the comment down front is that without rules, there is no creativity. So do we think that maybe all the standards help make us a little more creative to get around them to make sure we're...
If you have no rules, can you really,
Interesting.
does it force you to be creative?
Okay.
I'll speak to that.
Okay, good.
You know. So, the standards are not the issue. It's what we do with the standards that's the issue. So when we look at something like are the rules promoting creativity, yes or no? The question becomes, how clever are the rules? So one of the things that I've seen is that kids get really excited about digital video projects, but that's not necessarily because the project itself is so fascinating. It's because they know that they're all going to see each other's work. And so an expanded audience is really helpful. But one of the rules I gave them was, okay, you're going to have to do this, and you're going to have to be done in 45 seconds or less. And they would whine, oh, Mr. Hurley, it's not enough time, oh, why, you know, and that kind of stuff. And they're teens, and that's their job, and I understand. I'd worry about it if they didn't. But then they'd go off and they'd make good videos because they didn't have a lot of time to waste. So a good rule is a rule that focuses them on doing something well. Occasionally kids would come up and say, look, Mr. Hurley, we really need more time. We really need more time. I'd say, okay, show me your script. And if the script, was sound in terms of the stuff they were learning and things like that, I'd say, all right, well, do you have enough time with the other things you're doing? Oh, yeah. Okay, well, you got 2 minutes. Will that work? Okay, great. And so I think there's room for flexibility, but of course I was also trying to limit my exposure to bad videos as well. So there are a lot of different things in play. Anybody else on that?
No?
Good answer.
Good answer, yeah.
Yeah, great answer.
Anyone else? Comments, questions? Go ahead, Farrah.
Ideas to motivate reluctant teachers to use technology.
I got that.
I mean, they use the PowerPoint, they use Publisher, but just to branch out and say, be creative, use Animoto, anything. Any ideas to get them to say technology's the way it is today?
Okay, good. So motivating the reluctant teacher, and I heard Stephen say, I got it.
More bus duty if you don't.
Yeah, more bus line.
Beat them.
Well, continue.
No, I have 4,000 teachers. I have 4,000 different opinions on how kids should be taught. That's a battle that we face every single day. I think a lot of it is modeling. So I have some teachers who have really embraced this, and we get out of their way. We've got some teachers in some schools that are really doing some things that are incredible, and they are fortunate to have administrators who allow them to do whatever they want and get out of the way. I think the best thing that we can do is give those teachers a platform to show other teachers. But honestly, I really think it comes down to a third. You have a third of teachers, no matter what the building, where you are, the district, the state, the country, who really embrace this stuff. So here, we're a third. We're that top third. You're here, you're embracing this, you're in this room because you want to hear from the awesome minds sitting that way. And then you've got a third of teachers who understand that this is necessary, this drive towards digital teaching and learning is necessary. They're unsure how to get there, but with a little poking and prodding, they'll get there. But then you've got a third of teachers who are like, this is crap, I'm not doing this, the old way works. And I see that every day. And so I tell my folks, the folks that work for me, you focus on the 66% that want to do. And the evaluations and the parents and the kids will teach them out of a job. I mean, it sounds cold, and I've been knocked around for saying it, but you've got to focus on those wins. You've got to provide the platform for teachers who are really demonstrating that they're really doing awesome. That can be very powerful. Teachers are notorious for not wanting to share. So I took over in a classroom when my first year of teaching, I was a science teacher. I got put into a classroom of a teacher who had retired, and it took me 3 years to clean out all of the stuff because she didn't share anything. She never shared any worksheet, transparency, chemicals. She never shared anything. Teachers are notorious because we don't want to be seen as know-it-alls. But if you provide that platform for them, so I'm a big believer in meetings. Meetings suck. They're terrible. So I don't have meetings. I have learning times. And so my staff comes in. If anything I can explain in an email, it gets explained in an email. But during our time that used to be for our meetings, we learned something. So my staff is teaching each other. I'm bringing in experts to teach from each other. And I've got some principals who are embracing that. So they're flipping their meetings. I'm not a fan of the flipped classroom. We can talk about that later. I am a fan of flipped meetings, though, and those principals are providing platforms for their teachers to go in and talk about what they're doing well in their classroom. And I think a lot of times those teachers who say this isn't possible need to see that it's possible. We have a group of administrators in our district So one of the things we don't do well is professional development for principals, and so my goal in life is to change that everywhere. So we've started a principal-only professional development. This past Friday, we had them bring in their media coordinator. So they've never had the chance, the principal and the media coordinator, to sit down away from their building to talk about their media program. So we brought them in together. And so in our elementary schools, media is on a rotation with other specials. So PE is a day, and art is a day, and music is a day, and so is media, which is terrible because media should be open and free and access to anybody. And so I have some elementary schools that are doing that. And so you have two groups of people. You have the ones that say it's not possible, and you have the ones that say, yeah, it is possible. They just need to hear that from each other. So you have a group of people that come in and say, no, we can't take media out of the rotation. It'll cause all kinds of problems. Yeah, but we're doing that. I think they just need to hear from each other. They just need to be allowed to have time to spend with each other, to learn from each other. And you'll get those converts, but you'll never convert 100% of the people. And so focus your efforts on the ones who you can convert, who will do those good things, who will come along on the ride with you.
One thing to add. Go ahead.
So,
Heckle.
Heckle.
Hi, Steve. I'm too much of a fan to have a much, but I'm a K-5 librarian, and the dream, the perfect situation, I think, for K-5 libraries is a blend of fixed and flex schedule, so that teachers who would prefer that their kids never have art or never have library are required, to share the wealth. But having part flex schedule means you've got open lab time, and I've got that, and it's heavenly. But my heckling part is I challenge you admin people to look at the role that your schedule plays in opportunities for teachers. And also, this isn't a heckle, this is just a comment, tip of the iceberg comment, with regards to working with the living, working with the 67%. What I do as a librarian is I have a stealth maneuver in which parents are my puppets. And so I work with kids, and then they go home and they say, we did this, this, and this. And then the parents turn to the classroom teacher and say, we would love to see that in the classroom too. And a lot of teachers then, willingly or not, will get on board.
Your biggest advocates are your parents and your community. And I say this all the time, no matter what I'm talking about. I just did some things on parental engagement and websites, and your biggest advocates that you have are your parents and your community. And so if you can get your parents and community to influence what's happening in your school, which they should be anyway, because we don't have schools for teachers, we have schools for kids. But oftentimes we cater to teachers when we should be catering to kids, because that's who our clientele is. So our biggest proponents should be our parents. We shouldn't be afraid of a parent coming and sitting in our room the whole day. We should be embracing that and wanting them to be a part of that and wanting them to see. And again, I think that goes to show, I think parents want our kids to be involved in a lot of the things that we're doing in the classroom. They just don't know, they don't see the connection because they didn't learn that way. They learned by sitting in a row and by doing 20,000 problems every day, and that's how they learn math, and that's not how we're teaching math now. And so that's why we need to open those doors and bring them in. But she's right, we need our parents and our community are our biggest advocates, and I think that can be, I don't have to, principals and people like me don't have to tell teachers what to do oftentimes. A lot of times it's parents demanding that these changes happen.
So the original question about, you got these reluctant teachers. How many of you would say that you have, one of your top concerns is reluctant teachers doing something? No one. Wow, that's amazing. All right, so how many of you would say that you've got a staff that's really, really good about adopting things? Okay, that's a bit of a worry, but there you go. All right. So in the shameless plug department, tomorrow at 4 o'clock, there's a session called How to Get Teachers to Adopt Technology, What to and Not to Do. All right, so feel free, I totally am. All right. But it comes down to psychology. A lot of teachers see technology as something, some like evil in their lives. If the technology can overcome some other evil that they hate more, then they're in.
Bring new evil.
At our school, our philosophy is work with the willing, and we learned back some time ago, we had a teacher who really wanted a Promethean board, but the other teacher that she co-taught with in the other classroom didn't really, but we said, well, both classrooms have to be, quote, the same, right? Because it has to be fair. We don't want the parents in this classroom to complain and all that. Okay, well, one teacher has an amazing interactive experience that our kids use every day. The other teacher has a glorified whiteboard that we pay too much money for. So we do not have a lot of money in our school. We don't. And it's kind of like, I always tell my students, you can rub Einstein's head and you would not be smarter. It's interacting with Einstein that makes you smarter, okay? So having great things in your classroom means absolutely nothing. It means dip, as we say in South Georgia. It means nothing. It's what you do with what you have that means something. So we have one teacher who's getting ready to retire in math, and he doesn't even have a projector. He has one computer. He's not going to use it. He's not going to use it for anything, and we do not have the money to waste. So it is a work with the willing, but the parent pressure, I email out every week what's going on in my classroom and all the cool things we're doing and all the exciting things we're doing. And then the kids, when they get excited, they go say, well, for this assignment, instead of PowerPoint, can I use Haiku Deck? Haiku Deck for the web. It's amazing, by the way. So Haiku Deck, can I use that instead, or can I use this? And then most teachers, because most teachers love their kids and they want to be great teachers, they will say, if a kid says, I can do it better with this, they will say, sure, do that.
I was going to add one quick thing, and then I know Bill wants to heckle also. I think sometimes we do, and I'm as jaded as they come sometimes. But sometimes we do confuse ignorance with apathy, because I think there still really are teachers who we've told stuff to, and we've invited them to our awesome wiki workshops and whatever. But until they actually see wikis have made this classroom better, I think it behooves us as kind of the ed tech cheerleaders to not just go back and be cheerleaders, but to find authentic ways for teachers to see those things in action. And coming to me after school to see a wiki workshop, who really gives a flip if you're a reluctant teacher? Because I think some of those reluctant teachers really aren't reluctant. I think they just do think, God, that looks like a lot of time, and I don't know how that would manage. And I don't just want to hear you telling me about it in the teacher's lounge, or I don't want to hear the tech coordinator tell me how great it is. So I think as the leaders in the school, or the administrators, we also have to find time to somehow allow for teacher observations and classroom visits and things like that. So it isn't reluctant Miss Fourth Grade teacher hearing it from somebody who's not doing the same thing. It's, I want to see you do it. You have to teach these same kind of kids these same standards. Let me go see it really in action and see it work. And it's a hard thing to do. I know that, to find time for that. But again, not defending those holdouts. But
Okay, so Bill waved at me,
It's really a follow-up to that.
and then I saw Lee.
And I'm in the district office, so I've been visiting schools and been visiting schools that have new principals this year. It's just myself and our CIO. And what we find is the newer principals are pushing and are not pleased maybe with what has been done in the school that they've now inherited. And I'd like you to comment, the importance of the principal's leadership role in implementing technology, because the teacher can be reluctant, but if the principal is looking for it and expecting it, it kind of takes some of the reluctance out.
Okay, so principals, importance of principals. Diane, go ahead. We'll get you two, and then we'll see what they have to say. Go ahead.
Two things. The teachers need to have a WIFM, what's in it for me if I do. Mm-hmm. And the WIFM in my school, if you're a Parker, I retired in 2005, but we did year-long educational projects. Virginia will allow, if you were engaged in year-long educational project, to get recertification points. So that was our big pull, getting teachers working together to learn technology. I will do this, I will learn this, I will work with you, and oh, by the way, I'll get my recertification points for doing something.
Okay, great. So focusing on recertification. Go ahead.
I think for some of the reluctant teachers, it's like they're told you have to include technology, but they're never really shown how to do it. And so the reluctance comes from, well, I'm afraid to do it because what if I do it wrong? Yep. And so they really need the ones that are unafraid to kind of mentor them and help train them instead of just being left to flop around on their own.
Okay, great. Mentoring and training as well. We're down to about the last 15 minutes here. I do want to put in another shameless plug, and I'm going to look at Bill for this. I got an email from Bill Johnson in Virginia Beach, I don't know, 3-4 months ago or so.
I deny it.
Yeah. Anyway, he'll deny it, but his comment was, I'm hearing from my people that when they go to conferences, one of the most powerful pieces from them is just the conversations they have with people. What can we do to institutionalize that a little bit? So as you're going through your online program, one of the little tabs in sketch.org are these leadership conversations. Bill's leading one. Make sure you show up to his, because it was his idea. So of course I emailed him back and said, great, what are you going to do? But they really are meant to be this kind of conversation. We've said to the presenters, we don't want slides, we don't want a presentation, we want an opportunity for people to have conversations with each other, because we know there's great stuff going on throughout Virginia. VSTE tries to facilitate that through our social networks, but often you get in your classroom, you get in your school, there's a million things going on, you don't always have that opportunity to reach out. So it's here at the conference where you are with all these folks and have that chance. I think this is sort of the example of what we're looking for with that ability to dialogue with each other. So I'll just throw that out there. If you're looking for a more organized version of conversations, that's what those are really supposed to be all about. So I'm going to throw it open to you guys. Vicki's itching to share an app. I just know it, right? You got one in your pocket.
I got a couple.
So I'm going to give everybody, there's 4 of you, you all have like 2.5 minutes to say the last thing you want to say to this group of people.
Well, I'll speak to the principal thing. So I spend a lot of time working with school principals, and I'll tell you, and Bill can attest to this, and a lot of you in the room, there's almost a 1-to-1 correlation, I think, between the schools where teachers are really on board with technology and the way that the principal authentically models technology. I can't tell you how many times I've heard teachers say, yeah, she wants us to use the whiteboard and blah, 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 that woman can't hook up a projector to save her life. Or she's so big into, group projects and da-da-da, she never comes out of her office. She doesn't hang out in our classroom. So I think, let me switch to he then. But I think that's important too. So I think it's important for us as leaders to go back and also help our leaders to say, you're pushing this, or we're pushing this in the school, but what are you doing that models group work? What are you doing that models integration of technology or openness to outside resources or social media or whatever it is? And I don't think there's anything wrong with a principal asking for help to say, I don't know. I'm also ignorant as to what are some authentic uses I could be doing of technology that aren't just productivity, but that really are me modeling to a staff. Here's how we work outside the classroom. Here's how we bring outside resources. So I think that's just a big piece of it, is sort of genuineness of the commitment.
A couple things. My next book is Reinventing Writing, and I think that we need to teach kids how to take notes. I asked my students how many of you have taken a picture of a board today at school, and every single one of them raised their hand. I asked how many of you will actually look at that picture you took later, and nobody raised their hand. So they don't know how to find their stuff, they don't know how to review their stuff. I think that we need to look at group digital note-taking solutions in all of our schools. I love Evernote, of course. I'm actually taking notes right now in vJournal, which is my favorite journal for Evernote. Calendar 5 is my favorite calendar app. You should check it out. It costs a little bit of money, but if you are anybody have trouble with email? Okay, I have a major email problem. I get 500 or 600 a day. A lot of you guys, sometimes more, but Mailbox is, if you use Dropbox, you can get free Dropbox space. Mailbox is the most amazing mail app. It works with just about any mail. I highly recommend it. And then I wanted to throw 3 books out there for those of you who are getting ready for your break and you want to read. Platform by Michael Hyatt, for those of you who need to build your platform.
And she promises she'll tweet these later too.
I will, and I tweet about them all the time. These are some of my favorite books. There's another book called Start by John Acuff, for those of you who are struggling with starting things and all the fear that's involved, and it'll give you some things to tell those reluctant teachers. And then anybody read David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell? Yeah. Oh my goodness, except I highly recommend you download it from Audible because he reads it himself. He talks about affirmative action and the research based on that. He actually talks about the fact that it may be better if you're dyslexic than if you weren't.
he talks about class sizes and shows some research that actually the ideal class size may be somewhere between 18 and 24 kids. You may actually have such a thing as too small of a class. It limits interaction. There's all kinds of applications for education in that book, and all your parents and board members are going to be reading it. So we as educators have a responsibility to vet books that talk about education, especially when they're written by non-educators. So it is important that we read that book. It's a bestseller, and I think that we should all weigh in. And I'm real interested for some researchers and some people at our universities to share their opinions on the research he shares, because we have to be the ones to say, okay, it sounds good, but is it based in research? And that's my question. It's a compelling book, but I have a lot of questions about the research he cites.
So just learned about this really great new app called Twitter. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, but no, just kidding. Seriously, just kidding. I really do know what that's about. So I want to talk to the admin thing, because like I said, that's a really, if I die and every admin has had good, solid PD and technology, I can be a happy man. So we started a program in our district called TLC Technology plus Leadership equals Change. We just went through a big teacher evaluation change in our state, and the biggest piece of that changed was evaluating the teacher's use of technology. So I have 81 admin who are all pretty good, but they walk into a classroom and they have no idea how to evaluate technology. And then they have to look at a teacher and say, you really are terrible with technology, or you're really awesome with technology, and they don't have a clue. And so we started out by taking a cohort of our principals. We took 30 of them, and we did some technology walks where they partnered with myself or one of the members of my staff, and they walked into a classroom of teachers in their building who were using technology, and we did a walk. And we compared the notes afterwards, and it's like night and day. Things with the quote-unquote experts either saw or didn't see versus what the principals saw or didn't see. It was really evident they had no idea what good, but especially bad technology integration looked like. So we created this program and we broke it into 3 parts. One was understanding and making sure that our administrators knew how to use technology themselves. So the things that we wanted, because we knew they weren't going to come to PD that their teachers were doing. They don't. We invite them all the time. Principals find excuses. They have other things to do. They don't come to that PD, even though they should. So if you're a principal or you work with principals, they need to be told to be in those PD sessions with teachers, because they need to understand what's happening in those classrooms. So we get them up to speed on all the things that we're working on with teachers. So we went through, I have Promethean boards in a vast majority of my elementary schools. So they understand how to use those things. They can walk up to a board and be pretty good. We teach them how to use Web 2.0 tools. We teach them how to do all those things. Then we teach them how to do technology walks and how to evaluate the teacher's use of technology. But then most importantly, in the third part, in the last part of the year, we teach them how to coach teachers. The principal is not a manager. Principals are lead learners in their buildings. And if you know Joe Mazza is a friend of mine who teaches who's a principal in, well, he would hate that I would call him a principal, but he's outside of Philadelphia, at an elementary school outside of Philadelphia. He is not a principal. He's the lead learner in his building. And that's how it should be. He is the lead learner. And that's what principals are. They should be lead learners. But they should be lead coaches too. So we teach our administrators how to be a coach. When you see a teacher who's kind of integrating technology, but it could be better, how do you provide them the resources? How do you talk to them? How do you manage to bring them better up to speed when it comes to technology? And we've seen tremendous change with these administrators. So now we're going into year 2, and now we're doing things like working with your media program, working with technology budgets. It's all in an effort to help them be better technology leaders in their buildings. And so we focused a lot of time and attention and effort on teachers, which is where it should be, but we've lost a little bit with our administrators. We need to be spending a great deal more time and energy working with administrators at all levels, in buildings and in central office, to get them to feel more comfortable with technology, but more importantly, how to ensure that we have good technology integration going forward.
All right, Rushton, you get the last word.
All right, so I'm going to ask you to de-screen and look this way. I know that's kind of a convention foul, and I apologize for that. I just want to say that there are two huge ways to blow your opportunity here at VSTE. So here are two ways to do VSTE totally wrong. One is, you're at this conference, you might be listening to some people, with microphones talking to you, whatever. Most of the talent is sitting next to you and sitting around the room. If you leave VSTE and you haven't met 2 or 3 other people who you're going to share some ideas with going forward, you blew it. This is a wonderful opportunity to get to know some very cool people doing very cool things. The other way to blow it, not have fun. If at some point, during the day you're like, I'm not having fun, then you're doing VSTE wrong. By all means, make sure that the stuff that's happening around you, you look at it and go, how can that be fun for me? That's a perfectly good question to ask. And I hope that when you get to the end of this conference, you're like, dang, I've met some new people and that was a whole lot of fun, because that's the way to do it right.
Thank you very much. Thanks to our group, folks.